William the Conqueror, the first Norman king of England, and without a doubt the most famous Norman in English history. The story of 1066 and of his conquest of England has been told and retold throughout the centuries.
Which is why this video is not about him. Hello and welcome. My name's Philip, and this video is not about the most famous Norman, but rather the most important. Despite often being left to the footnotes of history books, the impact that this person's life had on English history is incredibly significant. Her name was Emma of Normandy, and she was Queen of England twice.
In the closing years of the 10th century, things were not going well for the Kingdom of England. The previous king, Edgar the Peaceful, had reclaimed the Danelaw, the Viking kingdom, centred on the city of Jorvik, and reunified England.
Unfortunately, not long after he did this, Vikings once again started raiding England's coasts. Edgar's son, King Ethelred, was seriously struggling to deal with them. After being defeated by a Danish fleet at the Battle of Maldon in 991, Ethelred paid £10,000 as tribute.
The raids continued, and in 994 another tribute of £22,000 was made. This bought a short peace, but in 997 the raids began again. First they attacked Cornwall, Devon and Somerset. In 998 Dorset, Hampshire and Sussex, and in 999 Kent. The Danish fleet was able to keep coming back again and again because they had a nearby safe haven.
When they weren't attacking England, they were resting with their cousins in Normandy.
King Ethelred was getting desperate. In the spring of 1002, he bought a peace with a tribute of £24,000. It was during this period he earned his sobriquet, Ethelred the Unready.
Quick side note about that name. Nowadays it sounds quite cute and silly, doesn't it? Like, oh no, he's not ready, he needs more time to get his tunic on. But that's because the original meaning has been softened over time. It's actually meant as a very insulting pun. In Old English, Athelrad means well-counselled, but Unrad means badly counselled. So Athelrad Unrad is a joke. It's calling attention to the fact that at best he was incompetent. At worst, well, look up the St. Brice's Day massacre.
One of the less mass murdery steps that King Ethelred took to curtail Viking raids was to seek an alliance with Normandy, ensuring they would not harbour his enemies. He sealed this treaty by marrying Richard the Fearless's daughter, Emma.
Richard was the grandson of Hrolfa, whom we've spoken about before, and he was the first leader of Normandy to be titled Duke.
Emma had been born in 984, and so was 18 years old when she married the 36-year-old Ethelred. Emma was brought to England, given the regnal name Alfkifu, and was granted loads of land, including the city of Exeter.
Becoming Queen of England may have been enough for most, but Emma was a Norman. She was ambitious. She knew just how precarious the position of queenship actually was. But what could be better than having a king for a husband? Easy. Having a king for a son.
Emma's first son, Edward, was born the following year in 1003. The year after, she gave birth to a daughter named Goda, and then a second son, known as Alfred the Noble, in 1005.
The problem was, Emma was actually King Ethelred's second wife, and so her children would always be second in succession to Ethelred's sons from his first marriage. During those years of peace, Emma busied herself making alliances and building support for her and her young sons.
Said peace, however, did not last. In 1013, the King of Denmark, Sweyn Forkbeard, sailed for England with a huge army. Seeing that this was not just another raid, but an invasion, Emma took her children and fled to Normandy. Her husband followed soon after, and Sweyn Forkbeard was declared King of England on Christmas Day.
England's first Danish king only ruled for 5 weeks, dying on the 3rd of February 1014. Emma and her family then returned to England. However, the following year, Sweyn's son Knut led his own invasion.
The English fought back, led mostly by Ethelred's son from his first marriage, Edmund Ironside. When King Ethelred died in April 1016, Edmund took the crown and made peace with Knut. The two agreed to end hostilities, each keeping the parts of England they currently held, on the condition that they named each other as their successor.
Essentially, if one of them died, the other would be King of England.
Knut didn't have to wait long, as Edmund died in November that same year.
So, Emma is in England, King Edmund Ironside has died, which means that finally her son Edward is next in line for the throne! Or at least he would have been, except that Knut is now king. What to do? Emma's no longer queen, her sons aren't set to inherit anything. Anyone else may have just given up and gone home. But not Emma.
In 1017, Emma of Normandy married King Knut the Great, and for the second time in her life was made Queen of England. At this point, Emma was 33 years old and Knut was 27. Emma's sons Edward and Alfred were sent into exile, back to Normandy, where they lived in the court of Emma's nephew, Robert the Magnificent.
Now, Emma's marriage to Knut may appear to have been simply political, but by most accounts there was genuine affection between them. The following year, Emma gave birth to another son, named Harthacnut.
The next 15 years were relatively peaceful. King Knut the Great earned his sobriquet, managing to rule Denmark, England and parts of Norway incredibly well. Emma established herself as not just an excellent queen, but a popular and well-liked noblewoman.
She became the wealthiest woman in England, and seems to have been respected and admired by all but a few of the English elite.
When King Knut eventually died in 1035, he was 45 years old. Harthacnut was made King of Denmark, and since he was facing unrest in his new kingdom, he left England in the care of his half-brother, Harold Harefoot.
Emma retained her power, effectively ruling Wessex herself. Harold Harefoot clearly felt threatened by Emma and her offspring, however, and sought to curtail Emma's influence by keeping her under close supervision. In 1036, Alfred the Noble led a small force into England, ostensibly to take his mother back to Normandy. He was captured by some of Harold's supporters, however, and blinded, later dying of his injuries. He was 31 years old.
The following year, Emma was able to flee England for the continent. The reign of Harold Harefoot did not last long thereafter, and in 1040, whilst his brother Harthacnut mustered a force to retake England from him, he died of an unknown illness. Harthacnut was then proclaimed King of England.
Faced with trying to rule two countries with a sea between them, Harthacnut relied upon his mother's good counsel. Emma was also instrumental in smoothing out the relationship between Harthacnut and his half-brother, her eldest son, Edward.
In 1041, Harthacnut, suffering bouts of illness, invited Edward back to England after 24 years of exile to become co-ruler. The following year, he passed away, and Edward was crowned King of England.
Edward's rule is a story for another time, but safe to say it was characterised by his affection for Normandy, the land of his mother and where he had spent most of his youth. That affection also caused him a great deal of strife from noble families that still felt threatened by Emma's influence.
It was around 1041 that the Encomium Emmae Reginae was written and presented to the Queen, a record of her life and the lives of her husbands and children. She had commissioned the piece herself, the first queen to take an active role in constructing and telling her own narrative, a privilege afforded to painfully few medieval women. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle takes a very cynical view of Emma's actions and relationship with her son Edward, but in the Encomium she seeks to justify her difficult decisions. It even intimates that Emma had just as much of a role in governing England as her son. The Encomium is still a key primary source for early 11th century English and Scandinavian history.
11 years after the Encomium was written, in 1052, Emma passed away, aged 68. She was buried in the Old Minster in Winchester. King Edward had her remains interred beside Knut and Harthacnut. She was the wife and mother of kings. And that's Emma of Normandy. But why do I say she was the most significant Norman in English history? Well, for starters, she's the initial link between the Kingdom of England and the Duchy of Normandy, two nations which up until that point had only really been hostile towards each other if they paid each other any mind at all.
Emma is the bridge that ties the future of England and Normandy together. Her son Edward spent most of his young life in the Norman court. In the early 1030s, during his exile, he served as witness to legal charters and was listed as Edward, King of the English. The Normans recognised his legitimacy as a king nearly 10 years before he was crowned.
He was only crowned, by the way, because of Emma's ingenuity and ability to negotiate. She served as the common link and intermediary between Edward and Harthacnut.
The second reason is that she was a trendsetter. Emma was the first Queen of England to be depicted in contemporary portraits, and appears to be the first model of Norman queenship. Intelligent, active, potentially quite dangerous.
It was a model repeated throughout the Norman period. Take for example Matilda of Flanders, Good Queen Maud, Matilda of Boulogne, Empress Matilda. There are a lot of Matildas. And of course, Eleanor of Aquitaine.
In the 13th century, a legend about Emma became popular. It said that she had been accused of unchastity by the Bishop of Winchester and had to prove her innocence through trial by ordeal. She was blindfolded and had to walk over a line of red-hot ploughshares. According to the legend, she easily did so, feeling neither heat nor pain. The symbolism of a powerful queen accused of misdeeds by men of authority and overcoming ordeals with grace and poise was hugely inspirational. And although probably not true, such a tale was not hard for people to believe. Queens were cool, and Emma was the OG.
So when King Edward was reaching the twilight years of his life, and with no children of his own, he may have thought about the young boy who was only 13 when Edward had left Normandy, but had since grown into a powerful and intelligent ruler.
Perhaps he reminded Edward of his mother, the brilliant, ruthless woman who had made her mark on English history. And perhaps he thought that his young cousin would make a suitable heir to the throne of England.
Yes, that time I was talking about William. Thanks for watching. Farewell.
Hey everyone, thanks again for watching. We're going to be doing a seasonal video next week, and then taking a little break until the new year. So make sure to like and subscribe, and hit that little bell so you'll be notified when the new videos come out. If there are any aspects of Norman history that you want to see us cover, drop a comment below, or just say something nice about us. Take care of yourselves. Bye!